Welcome once again. This is an amazing day that we have here, and it's been a while. But I hope you've been enjoying the recordings. And today we're going to have one of movers and shakers all the way from FM. And he's going to tell us a lot of, stories, since he's an expert storyteller. And one of the key things I want you to focus on today is what if the stories we tell could make people not just listen, but trust us in an age of algorithms, automation, and attention spans measured in seconds. One storyteller from Fargo, North Dakota, is helping leaders rediscover the most human skill of all, connection. Tonight, we explore how to build lasting trust with the 4 seasons of stories with the brilliant Max Kringen of Tellwell. So welcome to Impact Masters Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Kimathi. At Impact Masters, we focus on the tech ecosystem by creating and sharing knowledge. We tell authentic stories, preserving history, and embracing innovation, and most importantly, pointing out impact with actionable steps. Here, we are not just storytellers, we are disruptors of the status quo. This episode is produced in collaboration with Retold Podcast by Africa Stocking. Africa Stocking is a leading Africa communication platform as a service and developer platform. Africa Stocking provides SMS, USSD, voice and mobile data, and Airtime APIs, which amplifies the voices, shaping the future of businesses and technology across Africa and beyond. Without further ado, I'd like to tell you more about my guest, but it's good to talk about my guest while you can see him. My guest is Max Kringen, founder and chief storyteller of Tellwell, as I mentioned before, which is a creative studio that helps mission-driven organizations connect with their audiences in more human ways, from his headquarters in Fargo, North Dakota, or FM if you want. Max has spent over 15 years helping colleges, community foundations, and nonprofits that are trying to make the world a little better, but often struggle to tell their story in a way that builds real trust. Max's philosophy is simple. Story doesn't just communicate, it connects. He helps organizations move beyond polished interpersonal messaging to embrace authentic, sometimes messy stories that turn strangers into friends and friends into champions. This human-first approach has led to transformational results for Tellwell's partners, from helping Minnesota State Moorheads achieve a record that 1% increase in first-time student enrollment, to inspiring Ronald McDonald House Charities donors to contribute a record-breaking $350,000 in one evening. Originally from Edeling, North Dakota, Max believes that courage and curiosity are the essential ingredients for any story worth telling. He is passionate about helping leaders communicate boldly and build organizations that last. Without further ado, welcome to Impact Masters Podcast in collaboration with Todd. Such an honor to have you, man. And I hope by the end of this, we're going to be friends.
I already anticipate that we are going to be good friends. Michael, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. I have to tell you right off the bat, I'm a little nervous. This is my first live podcast. Every other podcast has been recorded. And so if I get a little sassy, we can just we can just edit it out. So I'm really excited to be here with you, Michael. Grateful for the stories that you're sharing and the voices that you're lifting up. So I'm really excited to be here.
I mean, we encourage our guests to feel comfortable. There's nothing that we're gonna share that is really new per se. The definition of new or embarrassing. It's just that we like to have a conversation. That's why we never send questions up front. Sometimes we change as we go, depending with the guest. So feel at home. Assume you're having a conversation with a friend. And to welcome him. To welcome you, I would like you to, there's what I've read, what is everywhere, which someone can Google. Who is Max? Where did Max start? Assume I don't know you, and this is the first time you are telling me all your story in a
Yeah.
compressed.
Well, my name is Max. I believe that stories have the power to connect people in a way that stats and marketing messaging just doesn't. I have been a storyteller all of my life. I have my grandpa Herb was the very first storyteller, and he was a master storyteller. And I'm actually working on a book right now, and part of the book is has been a journey to like learn more about those stories that he shared, and just learning more about him has been really really fascinating. And so I come from a line of storytellers, but maybe not the traditional storytellers that you're thinking of, like on broadcast or journalists or documentarians or those types of storytellers in the big way. I come from a line of educators and farmers. And so my parents are both educators, and my dad has always said, the best way to show somebody that you love them is to teach them something. But the best way to teach somebody something and make it stick is through the power of story. And so I've believed that my entire life because I've had these incredible storytellers around me for my entire life. And I'm so grateful and humble to have had that opportunity. But I went through college. I did all the things. I started my first big kid job, and I was a social media strategist for a large healthcare organization here based in North Dakota, but had a footprint of like 17 states and 7 countries. And I was this like 22-year-old that was trying to figure out how not to get fired in a corporate setting when I had never been in a corporate setting before. And what I discovered there was that one, story is what can move impact for giant organizations, but it can have even more impact on tiny organizations. And it's where I first got a taste of what it is to work with other marketing agencies and those types of folks and consultants and all these people that we paid a lot of money to help us share our story. And the frustration that I had was that every time I would leave those meetings, I'd feel like I had no idea what I was talking about. My ideas were not very good. The stories that I wanted to share were not worth telling. And I kept leaving those meetings feeling more and more like I had nothing to contribute to it. And then it really kind of dawned on me, and this kind of came from childhood, but the best way to show somebody that you love them is to teach them something. What if we created an agency? What if we created a creative studio that did as much teaching as it did telling? And so that's really where Tellwell was born, was this like love of story and really wanting to think about how do we create agencies? How do we create an organization that does it a little bit differently and really like surrounds those stories in love versus marketing messages?
Wow, wonderful. That's kind of fascinating because at Impact Masters, from talking to different guests who who have an amazing story, most of that story actually forms what they do because to some extent here people go to school, people become professionals in different careers, but if you just go a bit few years back or even all the way to the childhood, it forms those decisions to become a doctor, to become a storyteller, to become an influencer, to become a musician. So thank you so much, Max, for sharing that with us. So you have built a career helping organizations, different organizations, rediscover their voice. Why do you think, even with all the digital tools, digital platforms, the technology, it's really, really hard to tell that story and bring the brands out?
Is the question why? Is that difficult to share?
Yes.
Oh,
Right now,
wow.
you could have software, you could have the best digital camera you want, right? But still, it's really hard to really bring out the story and the brand. So you having interacted with these organizations, why do you think that is so?
I think it is so difficult to keep people's attention because our attention spans are so short and we are just listening for what we want to hear. And I think the biggest part of why it's hard to share those stories is because there are so many different people that are trying to tell you what they are that they're forgetting the best way to tell a story is to invite somebody in. And so this is called narrative transportation. Narrative transportation is that moment where you can see yourself in the story. And so the way that we do that is we actually use a framework called the hero's journey. The hero's journey is a storytelling framework as old as time, originally created by like Aristotle, made more popular in the 70s by Joseph Campbell, reintroduced to the marketing space in the 2010s by Donald Miller. And it's this idea that we have to position ourselves as the helpful guide. Right? You think about the best relationships that you've had, it's probably because you shared a moment of vulnerability with somebody. You shared a moment of learning with them, right? They didn't get the perfectly polished version of you. They got the part that's like a little bit messy. You think about your best friends, you're not talking about every single time that you had like the perfect answer. What you're talking about is, hey, do you remember that time that we ran out of gas? And when we ran out of gas, we ended up having to hitchhike like 2 miles back to that gas station. And then we met that really weird guy, right? Like, and I think one of the reasons that we struggle to connect with people is because we think that we have to be perfectly polished all the time. And I am here to tell you, I started the whole podcast by sharing like, holy smoke and rockets. I talk to people all the time. I love to talk to people. I love to get to share our story and invite people into a story. But like, I'm a little nervous, right? Like I'm a little nervous to be on a live podcast because of just like all of the variables that can happen. Our Wi-Fi could go out, my microphone could go out, my AirPods could die, right? But right there, what it does is it actually creates a moment of vulnerability to say, hey, I'm human too. You're human. That's our connection first. And so a bit of a long-winded answer to a fairly short question, but like we are getting thousands of marketing messages every day. And the number changes like daily from 8,000 to 12,000 to 10,000 to 15,000. Like we are getting so many marketing messages every day. And so I think it is so wildly hard to connect to people right now because there is this perception that we have to be perfect in order to share a great story. And I'm here to tell you, you don't have to be perfect. You just have to be authentic.
Yeah. When you talk about vulnerability, I also think the same media has a huge role to play, right? From the cinema world to the social media world to the trending topics, to the people making millions and whatnot. So everyone is like, before I get there, I need to prepare first. Do you think there's a cost that really people have paid, tremendously waiting to be perfect? And how can you mitigate that, waiting and just be vulnerable, start from scratch and build your brand while telling a story?
I think that is a huge barrier. I think the barrier to entry is so much lower than people think it is. I struggle with this. I struggle with this on the daily because as a professional storyteller, it feels like there's an expectation for my story to be perfect. And I will tell you, that stopped me. So we've been around for 11 years, right? We're about to celebrate our 11th birthday. That's very exciting. We have been talking about starting a podcast for 8 of those years. Like we have been talking about the need for a storytelling podcast where we can invite our friends and our story makers in to share their stories and to just like share their good words. We didn't launch it until last year. It took us 10 years. It took my imposter syndrome that long. Now that I look back on it, can you imagine how much better of a podcaster I could be if we started 8 years ago? That to me is wild. And so I think part of the challenge and the opportunity, or the obligation and the opportunity in front of us, is to say, like, just start. Everybody is going to be crappy when they start. When you start anything, I actually just recently took up stained glass making. I am terrible at it, right? Like, I cut my fingers all the time. I've burned my fingers on like the soldering iron. Like, I am terrible at it, but I am so excited to try it, because that repetition of trying something new and figuring out you can actually get good at it if you dedicate some time and energy and effort to it. Because I've had to do that now over the last 15 years, I now have that muscle built up where, like, I can go after that thing that feels a little bit uncomfortable in a very different way, and know that there's a potentially great outcome on the other side of it. So I'm not sure where the question started, but it was about barrier to entry and, like, just start. If it is like, we have the most magical device in our phone. Oh, that's my dog, Kevin. He's perfect in every way, by the way. But just start. Like, and maybe we don't want to get too into specifics. AI today has made the barrier to entry so much lower. We have the world's greatest consultants at our fingertips at any moment of the day, which means, like, we can, like, test ideas. We can push and pull on them. We can challenge AI to say, hey, challenge my thinking on this, make it better. And so the barrier to entry is so much lower. And now we just get to, like, start our day at 30 miles an hour instead of trying to start it from scratch.
Yeah. I mean, that's quite solid. And one of the things that I've seen people struggle with, because everyone is like, and I think also this has to do with how different modern world is right now. So people are used to, like, if I don't know how to do something, I go to school for it, or I take a training or something like that. So we are living in a world where we have scientific approach towards everything that we do. And for you, I liked your story more because even you have a framework of your storytelling, which you call the 4 seasons of story. And I would like us to dissect, like, before even we get to the 4 seasons, what actually influenced you coming up with this framework?
Yeah. So I would love to tell you that it was like an aha moment, that I was just like, look at this stroke of brilliance that came to me in a dream, but it's not. It is, so we have a communications funnel that we use, and lots of folks have different communication funnels that they love. You could call it a marketing funnel. You could call it a sales funnel. You can call it whatever you want. Ours is very simple. It has 4 steps, and it's introduce, educate, engage, and remind. So introduce is like, you have to spark that curiosity. You have to get people thinking about, do I belong in this story? Right? And think about the best friendships that you have or relationships that you have. They started with curiosity. Could I see myself becoming friends with this person? Can I see myself enjoying this person's company? Next is educate. Educate is where you get to know the DNA of somebody or what makes them tick. But beyond just understanding how they work, you also have to understand that they have been through this before. So if you're an organization or you're a nonprofit or you're a business or any of those things, people have to be able to trust that you understand what you're talking about. You've done this before. You have the case studies to prove it. You have the theories behind why it works. Only once you've sparked curiosity and you have earned trust can you ask people to join you in your story. For a lot of people, this is a call to action. It says, buy my product, buy my service, buy my offering, attend my event, do my thing, download my ebook. But it's only once you've established, hey, this could be for you. And two, you can trust me because I'm here and I've been doing it, that you can invite somebody into your story. The fourth part, I think, is the most important. It's remind. Remind is reminding people that you love them so that way they can remember that they love you too. I think this one gets forgotten because Michael, as you talked about at the beginning, like there's so much noise. And we think once we've made the sale, that's it. We've done our work. We don't need to do any more. But if you want to take them beyond a sale, beyond whatever that first call to action is, you have to remind them that their input matters, that them buying your product, them buying into your service, them trusting you matters. And so we do that by saying thank you, by saying, hey, your dollars that you donated to this organization directly impacted this. And so that is really the funnel that then we were working with a client and they're like, how do you figure out your content calendars? And I was like, well, it's a seasonal calendar. And then I was like, oh, wait a second. There are 4 seasons. There are 4 parts to the funnel. There's 4 big elements of trust. And that's really like how we started doing it, where we start. I was like, there's something here and I don't know what it is. And then started to research it. And sure enough, humans follow seasonal cycles of communication and what like motivates us and what gets us excited and what drives us to action. And so it was a natural flow into those 4 seasons.
Wow, that's wonderfully well put. I know with every story, people also struggle with being fresh, right?
Yes.
My colleague who is a marketing guru and uses pirate metrics always says, in fact, a good story should be refreshed every day, if not every week. And I know with the seasons, is there like a framework below the framework that really would keep your story fresh? And if that's the case, people also go through the season where, there's that energy, you've closed a deal, you've, ticked a KPI, and sometime you have not, right? And you don't feel like sharing that with anyone. How do you balance that to ensure that, your story is fresh, it's authentic, and it's actually resonating with what you do and your customer?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And it's one of the most challenging that we run into with nonprofits all the time, because oftentimes they have 1 or 2 stories that they can share. What we encourage people to do is just look at that story through the lens of that season, through the lens of what is motivating people in that particular season. So let's use a story of, we'll call her Pamela. Pamela has fallen on hard times. Pamela has to go and use the emergency food pantry. When we look at Pamela's story through those different lenses, through curiosity or the introduce or spring season, we might say, Pamela had fallen on hard times and Pamela didn't know where to reach out to. Pamela happened to find us on the internet, and then we were able to connect with her and make her feel at home. One of the biggest things with things like that are shame triggers. And so we welcomed her in. We wanted her to feel like she was at home, right? And she had found the place that could help her. That might be the frame of that story for our spring season. Then we go into summer and we try to build trust. And so in the trust season, we're saying, hey, we help people like Pamela every day. We help people like Pamela because we know that we are uniquely equipped to do it. We have incredible donors. We have incredible supporters and partners that help us make sure that our food pantry shelves are stocked every day. So that way nobody has to walk away hungry. So that's our trust. We're telling people, hey, we understand how Pamela feels and we have authority. We are uniquely equipped to solve Pamela's problem. Then we go into fall season. Fall is engage. And so in the United States, Q4 is the number one giving season of the entire year because of taxes and things like that. But also because we're coming up on holiday season where people are feeling more generous and people want to be giving more. And so rather than telling them that you have to give, what you should do is invite them into giving. And so in the same story, we may say something like, hey, we want to make sure that anytime there's a Pamela in our community, that our shelves are stocked with food for her and her kids. So if you can help us, if you can become part of Pamela's story, we would love that. And you can do that in a couple of different ways. You can do that in donating food. You can do it in donating money. You can do it in XYZ. Give people different ways to do it, but give them a call to action, because people don't want to have to guess how to engage with you. They want to be told, right? In general, we want to be helpful. But how many times has something like tragic in your family happened and somebody, a dear friend, might say, let me know if you need anything. But what are you going to ask for? I don't know what I need in that moment. But if your friend comes up and says, hey, I know that this is a really hard time right now, and this person is sick, I'm going to bring over dinner on Tuesday night. Suddenly, you don't have to make all of the decisions anymore. You don't have to try to interpret what help means. You can just be the recipient of it. And so you can do that for your customers. You can do it for your donors. You can do it for your advocates by saying, here is very specifically how you can help. Finally, we have remind, or the winter stage. Winter is when we bundle up. At least in North Dakota, it is very cold in North Dakota in the winter. We bundle up, and it is our time to hunker down and just stay warm. And so it's our time for a little bit of reflection too, where as the organization, we might say, hey, your $25 donation helped us make sure that Pamela and her kids are fed this week during the coldest week of February. Thank you so much for that. Notice I didn't say, now here's how you can donate again, because part of reciprocity is a genuine gratitude for saying, thank you. Thanks for being a part of our mission. You have a part in this story now. And so those are the 4 seasons. It's spring, introduce, spark curiosity. Summer, engage and trust. Tell people that you know what you're doing. Explain it to people. Show it to people. Show people that they can trust you. Engage, call them to action with a clear plan. And finally, remind people that you love them and you're grateful for their gifts to you, so that way they can remember that they love you too. When you do those steps in that order, incredible things will happen. And that works not just for nonprofits. That works for businesses, that works for schools, that works for community organizations, that works for nonprofits. It works across the board. We work with a bunch of different organizations, from government entities to nonprofits to universities to businesses to a local hardware store. This framework works when you put the story in that order.
Wonderful. I think I dropped a bit there. But there are a couple of things that you really shared that reminded me of some of the conversation I've had with a few of my friends. And this has to do with trigger. And trigger definitely means something reminds you of certain trauma. And this, again, piggybacking on, growing up and the experiences that we have growing up and the environment we grow up. Of course, most of us also, even to the old age, we deal with trauma.
Mm-hmm.
That actually might determine if we want to tell our story, or if we have ever told our story and we got punished for it. So it becomes, a world where a lot of people have masked, It's always there's something they want to conceal from other people knowing because of the previous experiences. And this can actually be transferred to the day-to-day startup or even organization that we have. How do you really merge the two? Because my next question will be, if you're growing an organization, you bring new people in, right? And you want to keep that trust. How do you ensure that everyone who comes in actually shares in those values? And should you even have a process where you address some of these traumas either through, honest conversations and, processes that have been tried and tested to ensure everyone feels these are safe space. And of course, that transfers to the day-to-day dealing of the organization. I know it's a loaded question, but it takes some time. If anything was lost, just let me know. I can repeat a few things.
No, I heard you crystal clear. And what a sage question. Like, what a deep question. And because, like, a lot of the stuff that we're talking about, it sounds like it's just easy, right? And hopefully in the way that I'm sharing it, it makes it feel easy. But Michael, you hit on something that is so wildly important, is that those trauma triggers are real. And when we invite somebody into our story, it is our opportunity and obligation to share our vulnerability. But vulnerability is not just word vomiting, and it is not what we sometimes refer to as trauma porn. It is not that, right? We don't want to spook people by just like word vomiting everything that went wrong. What sometimes happens is we can get caught up in like, what is the trauma itself versus what is the outcome that we are looking for? What is the outcome? What is the heroic ending instead of the potential tragic results? And in our 24-hour news cycle, in our news ecosystem right now, it's all bad. It feels like there's no good news out there. People are so desperate to latch on to a little bit of hope. And if you're selling candles, or you have a food bank, or you have a podcast, you have something that people can look forward to and create a little bit of hope around. And so what you want to do is you really want to say, here is why I am uniquely equipped for this. In the hero's journey, we refer to this as establishing who is the guide. In order to establish yourself as the guide, you first need empathy. Empathy says, I get what you're talking about because I've lived through something similar. I've helped somebody through something similar. I've done something similar. And then you go into authority. Authority is, those are the numbers and the statistics about how we've helped them, right? Like you started when you introduced me talking about some of our incredible statistics about how we helped an organization raise $350,000 in one night, or we made a local university the top university in the entire state, and we helped them turn that around in about a year. Well, those are impressive stats, but why do we care about that? It's because we have seen universities die. It's because we've seen parents not know where they're going to stay or not be able to afford to stay at a hotel. Ronald McDonald House allows parents and families to stay in their homes while their children are going through medical procedures. And so these are the most stressful moments of their life. And so what we get to say is like, we want to make sure that nobody has to experience that. That's why we're doing XYZ work. To jump back to the part of the question about what happens if you've been trained to not tell your story, my challenge to you is to say, who was the audience that we delivered that story to? Was it the right audience? Was it the audience that is equipped to give us that type of negative feedback? Because oftentimes what happens is our loudest critics are not the people that we'd be going to for advice in the first place. And when we go to the people, that love us and that we love them, they're going to be honest with us in a different way. And if our message didn't resonate with them, they will share that. But if you are just taking criticism from people that you wouldn't seek advice from, that's a no-go. And you gotta check yourself a little bit there. Now, I'm not saying that trauma that sometimes happens when you share something deeply personal and it is not well received is not real. It is absolutely real. And I can tell you firsthand, I have had stories fall absolutely flat where I'm like, this is going to kill it. But then after a tish of reflection, I realized that's not the audience for that story. That audience is not going to resonate with that story. And it is my job, it is my obligation and my opportunity as a storyteller to recognize who is in front of me and who's going to resonate with that story. And it's also my job to have one or two or three of those in my back pocket so that way I can customize the story to whoever I'm talking to. And when you use a framework like introduce, educate, engage, and remind, you can like in real time be cultivating this story. So that way you don't have to just like memorize 15 different stories in the hopes that you can pull one out, but you just have to have little memories that say, I'm equipped to do that because I'm going to introduce, I'm going to spark curiosity. I'm going to show them my DNA. I am going to call them to action. I'm going to invite them into the story. And then I'm going to remind these people that are listening to my story right now how much I love them. And when I do that, they are going to remember how much they love me.
Wonderful. You help mission-driven organizations move beyond just marketing and ensure that they are relating to their audience, as you put it clearly, and build a true loyal community versus just a customer base. What are the warning signs that, these people are not just customer base, but there is a relationship in it and it's not becoming transactional? Because you have seen companies where people love the products or they love the service or they love even the help, but over time it becomes transactional and that loyal, it just fades away and even the customer feels some type of way. What are those measure, like metrics that you can be looking for to see if you're changing and how to fix that?
I think the real metric, and this is going to be a soft metric, is what does a conversation sound like? When you're engaging somebody in a conversation, whether that's on social or in an email or a phone call or a text message, are they responding? Because if they're not, then it is probably because it feels like a machine wrote it or AI wrote it or something along those lines. Like you are shouting into a void versus, inviting somebody into a conversation. And that's not to say like end every post with a question that might draw action, but it's truly like, tell us about a time when you fill in the blank. It really is a two-way street. And you can feel when you're buying, does it feel like a transaction or does it feel like a relationship? And when you go through the trust framework, you're truly starting to build a relationship versus just a transaction. And so if you're sending out emails, if you're posting on social and it's just crickets and nobody's talking back, I think that's a big warning sign. I think the other big one, and this is a self-reflection one, is that if you have a call to action on every single piece of content, that is a warning sign that you have a one-way transactional relationship and not a two-way loving relationship. If every single email, text message, etc., is asking them to do something, then that is a huge warning sign to say you're not in a relationship, you're in a transaction.
Wow. I can actually think of so many, of those emails I've ever received or,
Yeah.
And I think this to our listeners, think about your last post, email or updates. Did it invite connection or just chase conversion? And maybe on the comments or, on the discussion. Just let us know and see how we can actually exchange, knowledge, and see how can we change that and build more relationships.
Yeah.
One of the key things that comes out clearly in your framework is the courage to be able to be authentic and to build trust. But courageous is one of the hardest thing to build as a leader. So in this leadership building, you need to have that courage or build it if you don't. Are there like specific, culture you should have grown to become courageous? Like I'm from Africa, and there are some tribes that are considered warriors by nature of them belonging to certain, tribe, because also the culture that for you to be a man, you have to kill a lion, you have to go through the rite of passage, you have to go, like back in the days, and these stories, you had to go and take cows from another community just to show that you're courageous enough and you can take risk to live given that moment. I know nowadays it could be, I've closed a business in Silicon Valley, I've closed another business in London. That shows now you're courageous to face the world and be able to make a deal. But you can see all this coming to even what you're experiencing today in terms of, Ukraine versus Russia, Israel versus Gaza. It's to some extent, if you look at beneath all this, is people trying to dominate each other, sometimes with no reason or whatnot. But at what point do you say, now I'm courageous, and this courage, I can use it for good to make sure that I'm building a base of authenticity, I'm being trustworthy, and no one actually feels unsafe around me, including my customers?
I think that's it's a beautiful question, and it's a beautiful reflection. And I think the opportunity in front of us is simply clarity. When we say courageous communication, I think that we have a visual in our mind of somebody shouting from a soapbox, somebody shouting from a podium, somebody making their voice really big and getting people to follow them. But I don't think it's that at all. For us, it's really about having the courage to be clear. It's about having the guts to have a strong point of view, knowing that that point of view might not be for everyone, which is what we just talked about with audience. It's about having the courage to just be human instead of hiding behind jargon, instead of hiding behind fancy marketing messages or things like that. I think this is the opposite of what so many companies and organizations do, because they really do safe communication, right? It's messaging that has been through so many committees that it actually doesn't say anything at all, and it tries to please everyone, so it ends up exciting no one. We were just talking about that example of the regional university. They are an incredible university, but they were stuck in a term that we use in the Midwest America, which is Midwest humble. And that is really like being afraid to talk about how great we are. And so for them, the courageous part wasn't just about a new campaign. It was their leadership having the courage to simplify their university name. As an example, that was a huge risk internally. Like we changed the name of the university to make it clearer who we were. It was having the type of courage to adopt a confident message. So they're the Minnesota State Moorhead Dragons, and so we shrunk that message to Dragons do more, and there was this challenge that was happening at the time, because in the United States, almost all universities are facing funding shortages and funding cuts. And so the real fear was that somebody or the general public was going to insert the rest of that as Dragons do more with less. And we said, what if we do more with more? What if we invite people into that story? So that was courageous by creating clarity. I think as founders and leaders, we are often so incredibly close to our work. We're so deep in the weeds that we forget that other people don't have the same context that we do. And I believe that it takes courage to just simplify your message, and it takes courage to be specific about what you're asking for, because you're afraid you might turn some people off if you ask them for what you want and what you're inviting them into. And so the more specific that we can be, I think the more courageous that we can be. This we talked about a little bit ago. This is vulnerability, right? And it's saying, I want to put a stake in the ground. This is who we are, and I want to invite you into the story. And I think that's what courageous leadership looks like.
I mean, I'm taking notes, and I'm asking myself, maybe the next question should be my question personally. So, assuming you are coaching a founder who is terrified of showing their messy middle, where they can't, tell the story or be authentic, where would you start?
I start by asking the question, why? And if you're familiar with Simon Sinek's work, he says, start with why. Why did you start this thing? So if you're a founder, and Michael, maybe I ask you this question, why did you start?
For me, even taking Impact Masters podcast and Impact Masters initiative, which eventually you're planning to build a hackerspace, for me is just to address over 70% youth who are already there, and maybe more by 2030, which is 5 years from now.
Yeah.
And who are really brilliant, and the world looks at Africa as a baggage, as always asking for things. And for me, Impact Masters was this place that could outlive maybe my lifetime, but essentially solve the problem of, can actually people look at Africa as a place that could give what they have. And one of the things that you realize in Africa people have is the capacity, human capacity, which actually changes everything. When you look at Europe, you look at America and elsewhere, the world is growing hold, and it's not multiplying as fast. It's not multiplying as fast, but Africa in general, it's growing younger, and every day it's growing younger and younger. But just basically, but there's a whole story. Yeah.
So let's keep going on that. Michael, you said it is important for young people in Africa to understand that they have more to give. Why is that important?
Because number one, when I did my research, is that our story is never told in a positive way in the world. So hence Impact Masters podcast. Neither do we have our history recorded somewhere where we could actually go back and learn from our forefathers and previous inventors and whatnot. And for me, basically, I might not be able to change that. I might change that, or someone else might come along through the hackerspace and change that. But if we start recording from 2025, for instance, maybe in another 100 years, which is 3035, we'll have enough story to change that generation. I might be alive, I might not, but the journey has to start.
So, Michael, what happened? What was the thing that said to you personally, this is really important? Get rid of the research. Get rid of the stuff. What happened? And let's jump all the way back to the beginning of the podcast. What happened when you were a kid that said, this is important? These are important stories to share.
That's a very good question. So one of the key things growing up, and this is not unique to me, if you make it in Africa, it's crazy. It's like you can make it virtually anywhere. And I said, it doesn't have to be this hard. I'm not saying I have an overnight solution, but it doesn't have to be hard for my children. It doesn't have to be hard for the next generation. I can start doing something. And one of those things that I've done over time for the last 15 years or so is equip people with skills that are actually acceptable globally and they can serve everywhere. And as we speak, that has worked tremendously. So these are the journeys actually inspired by what I've tried and seen it work. And one of the key things is I try to, whoever I work with or my friends, like now Max, is to encourage you, how can you actually be part of this solution? Because if you come together, it doesn't matter if you're from Africa or whatever, and I'm sure even US has its own problems. If all these problems you're able to address a piece of it, it might take time, but eventually we have seen when people come together, they have been able to address the most traumatic situation, the most devastating situation that we've ever encountered as a world, including where people are fighting, but there's peace, including where people are sick and dying, and then there's vaccine. But there are some underlying factors that I think for me, I want to move, I spend my lifetime actually addressing before that happened. And before that happened is that create opportunity before the tragedy. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah.
It definitely did. Yeah. And so for the sake of time, I'm not going to ask why again, but if you notice, we got to 3 whys.
Yeah.
Okay. To get to the root, to get to that messy middle, we have to go why 5 times. And so the next question may have been, Michael, why, when you're talking to friends, is that thing important? Right. And so you asked me, how do you get to that messy middle? Well, how you get to that messy middle is you ask why 5 times. And by getting to the core of it, and your core may be that like you want to create opportunities for your kids that you didn't have, or you want to create new expectations that your kids get to live up to that maybe weren't expected of you, that you just had to like figure out for yourself. And that can be a great messy middle, because what that does then is that forces you back in time to think about all of those different times that you're having conversations with friends. You're having conversations with parents. You're having some sort of a crisis moment, a come to Jesus moment with the organization that you're working with. It's once you figure those out and you realize that you've come out stronger on the other side of it, those are the messy middle parts that then get more comfortable in sharing. And what happens is it's muscle memory. So when you start sharing those stories and you realize that you came out stronger on the other side, once you start to get comfortable with that, then you will get more comfortable sharing the messy middle, even when you're right in the middle.
That makes a lot of sense. This reminds me, in 2015, I don't know if you are familiar with the Impact Hub. In fact, if I'm honest, I got the Impact name from that experience, where we had some few workshops actually thinking about different solutions, but with it essentially starting Impact Hub. So ideally, those workshops actually were eye-opener to like, how do we build with purpose? How do we build, even if it's for profit, with purpose? This brings me to the second question around, the trust. I know you help nonprofits and mission-driven kind of company, but definitely even for profit or SaaS, we have seen people do different initiatives, including what big tech is doing. How can they use 4 seasons framework to build the trust with their users?
Yeah. Story is uniquely human. It has nothing to do with industry. It has nothing to do with verticals. It has nothing to do with for-profit or not for profit. This is the favorite question that I get, because story is uniquely human. It doesn't matter if it's business to business, business to consumer. We talk about stories and that ability to connect as human to human, right? I have a new friend in Michael because we've shared these stories, because we've shared a little bit of vulnerability, because I've learned things from you. You've taught me things. Therefore, I love you now. And this is like a really fun thing. I think people see our work in nonprofit and say like, okay, maybe it's just not for them. But honestly, I think this framework is even more powerful in for-profit businesses. We may work with nonprofits and universities, but ultimately we're a for-profit business as well. And the reason that I think this message and this framework is resonating so much with people is because so few people are doing it. And so this is a unique way to stand out and become more human. The principles are really about people, and every business serves people. So if I were to make the connection real quick to SaaS, right? And SaaS is a super crowded market, software as a service. The real advantage isn't one little feature, right? Like people talk about features and benefits all the time. The real advantage in that space is trust. Because how many times have we been sold so many things that we didn't need? How many trials have you started that then it feels like they're stealing your money because you forgot to cancel it, right? And so just like cranking through the seasons real quick, for spring, this might be, this is your introduction, right? This is your moment of curiosity. This could be where a founder could just talk about the frustrating problem that made them build the software in this first place. And that's really about making the story human behind the code, right? Because SaaS companies, we want to be so polished. We have to have the perfect pitch. But what if the founder or somebody who just uses a product shares, hey, I'm a human. This is why I needed this. This was the problem that I saw. As we navigate into like trust and education in the educate part, this is where you maybe create some tutorials that don't just show what a feature does, but why it was designed that way. You're teaching your philosophy. And remember, when you teach somebody something, that's the best way to show them that you love them. And so give them something that they can use on your platform or not. The more that you teach them, the more that they're going to be invested in you. When we talk about fall, and that engage, the call to action portion, this is their big product launch video. It should feature real people whose life got easier because they use this service. That is so much more powerful than a list of features, right? People can in general remember three things, right? And so if you're on fire, you stop, drop, and roll, right? And so the moment you get past two things, people are checked out. And so don't give people a list of features. Give them real people that they can connect with and connect with their stories. And then remember, this is my favorite part. Remind people that you love them so that way they remember that they love you. Send just a quick thank you video saying thank you to their customers for all of the feedback that helped shape the product in the last year, and even make the connection. Because I know for several of the SaaS companies that like I subscribe to, one of the things that I run into all the time is like, send us feature requests, send us bugs, send us all this stuff. I'll send them, but I have no idea if they were fixed. I have no idea if they were integrated. I have no idea if that made them another $1 million because of that idea. A very simple video that says, hey, thanks for doing that, goes a long way.
Send some swag. Yeah. So this other section, I'm going to ask a few quick reflections. First thing comes to mind to you on this situation. A story that has changed you.
A story that's changed me.
Mm-hmm.
A story that has changed me. When we started Tellwell, we started in a co-working space. A co-working space is kind of like an incubator where lots of people can be together. And we had met this wonderful person named Annie there, and she happened to be working at the co-working space. The person who owned the co-working space, the executive director, was not super kind to Annie, and Annie is brilliant. And And when those two decided to part ways, we were no longer in the co-working space. We had kind of graduated to our first office. And I said, Annie, like, while we're trying to figure stuff out, like while you're trying to figure stuff out, why don't you come and like work with us at Tellwell and like help us figure out, we don't know how to project manage anything. And like, she is really good at taking a problem and kind of like dissecting it, pulling it apart, and then figuring out how to solve it. She's really, really brilliant at it. And so she came and she did that with us for about 6 months. And during that 6 months, a local university was basically writing a job description for her, and she wanted to get back into higher education. So we knew our time was short together. About 5 years later, I was in need of somebody who could love our people, who could love our staff in a way that I just didn't have time, capacity, the knowledge to like train people up, love people into what their next big thing was, either here or somewhere else. And so at this point, Annie and I were, we still connected every single month. We had happy hour. And I showed her the job description for a chief of staff role. And I said, what do you think about this? And she's like, oh, it's pretty good. And I was like, cool. I wrote it based on what I know of you. And she's like, oh, well, that's very kind. And then she like read through it a little bit more purposefully. And she was like, interesting. Yeah, let me see who in my network I have. And it was fascinating. That was a Wednesday. On Sunday morning, I was out walking my dog. My dog's name is Kevin. I already introduced him once. And I was like, you know what? Clarity is kind. I didn't just write it for like to mimic her. I wrote it for her. I wanted her to be the person that comes in and loves on our team like that. And so I just messaged her and I said, hey, I realized I kind of skirted around it, but like, I would love for you to apply for that. I think you'd be incredible at it. And she messaged back probably 5 minutes later and was like, that's so interesting. You should say that, because I was just journaling about it. And now she is our chief of staff. And she's been our chief of staff for 3 years. And so there is this thing about relationships.
Yes.
And her story and our story together, because we have a story together, it didn't have a beginning and an end because she worked for me and then didn't work for me. Our story kept going. And because that story kept going, and because we kept reinvesting in that relationship, really through that trust funnel of introducing, educating, engaging, and reminding that I loved her and that she loved me, we were able to come back together and say, hey, I think you're uniquely equipped to do this thing.
Yeah.
Right. And so often we are looking at people as transactions versus relationships. And when we start to look at people as relationships instead of transactions, incredible things can happen. And what I can tell you is her office is right above my office. And she is one of the reasons that we have we've doubled our revenue, right, in the last 3 years. We wouldn't have done that if it wasn't for her being here and helping me to see clearly. So that's a story that's transformed me.
No, I mean, that story, there's so many lessons in it. And it's a wonderful, wonderful story. Thank you for sharing that. 2 is a lesson every storyteller learns too late.
Oh, a lesson every storyteller learns too late. Don't make up stories. Don't make up a story. People crave authenticity. People want real stories, and they can see through an inauthentic story. If you remember when we first started talking about the seasons of story, I was like, I would love to say it came to me in a dream and I just brilliantly I waxed eloquently about it. But the reality is how many people have that aha moment when they're just like, hey, I'm going to make this up until I figure it out. And I'm just like going to word vomit until it makes sense. Well, suddenly that makes me be able to connect with people in a different way. And so tell real stories, tell authentic stories, and you can't go wrong.
Wonderful. The third one word that defines trust for you.
One word that determines that says trust to me. Reciprocity. And here's why. I think oftentimes trust feels like a one-way street. And I think the best relationships, I can't be vulnerable with you unless you're vulnerable with me, right? I can't be truly vulnerable with you unless you're vulnerable with me. I can't be truly honest with you unless you're truly honest with me. I can't truly trust you unless you trust me. And, there's people that say you have to earn trust. And I say, why don't you trust until there's a reason not to? And so reciprocity, like, hey, assume the best in me because I'm assuming the best in you. Assume that you're coming from a place of authenticity because I'm assuming you're coming from a place of authenticity. So assume the best in me. I'll assume the best in you. Trust me. I'll trust you. So reciprocity.
Wonderful. The last one, the next season in your own storytelling journey.
Yeah. So I am so excited about this. We have a nonprofit storytelling conference. And really, you could take out nonprofit if you wanted to. You could just call it a mission-driven storytelling conference. And it's coming up in April of 2026. It's April 30th. And we want to invite the world to it. We want to invite everybody to it. And so we have the in-person version, which is going to be in Fargo, North Dakota. There'll be room for about 250. But we want to fill up our online version of it. And we have an incredible, it's not like you're tuning into a Zoom call, right? This is interactive. We actually have a host just for this who comes on during the break. So while other people are mingling, we're actually creating rooms where people can mingle. And this is going to be a storytelling masterclass. And it is affordable. It is impactful. It is going to be incredible. And so that is the next thing that I'm really excited to be working on. And that's probably the next big thing in my storytelling journey is getting ready for Well Told.
I mean, that makes a lot of sense. In everything that I've ever done, I always feel like the summit is always bringing people together, learning from each other, and also creating those experiences that people will always remember that they were part of this journey. So that is wonderful, and I look forward to that. Please share whenever it's ready.
Absolutely.
You might see me there.
That would be incredible.
But thank you so much, Max. This has been phenomenal. Where you can, and it's really good for our listeners who come from all over. I was just checking the stats the other day, and I was like so much inspired that now our listeners come from everywhere in the world. When I started this, I was like, let me just tell the African story that everyone, compresses in 2 minutes, and it's always about what negative is happening. But now sharing some of these lessons and everyone getting to listen to them, I don't take it for granted. Thank you so much. And also don't take it for granted that people joined us online and they watch these when we share them, publicly through the raw files and edited files. And also thank you again for joining us and sharing such timeless insight. To everyone listening, if this conversation has made you rethink how to tell your story, share it with one person who is ready to build trust that lasts. As I always say, I'm not charging for this. The only way you can pay me back is pay forward and share with everyone. I'm Michael Kimathi, or you can call me MK, and this is Impact Masters Podcast in collaboration with Retold Podcast. And keep building, keep connecting, and keep leading with courage and disrupting the status quo. Until next time, goodbye, everyone.